working? Is it working? Let me just... Oh, boy. What a world, what a world. Hide the chat here. I don't like looking at the chat box until I've already kind of said everything that I have to say. Usually the chat box doesn't have much going on in it, but, it's a little distracting, kind of like, just like, I don't know, what am I trying to say? Like, people, like, anticipating people talking, or if they do talk, it, like, distracts me from the thoughts that I'm trying to complete, and I would rather just respond to those chats after I kind of get out what I want to say. You know what I'm saying, folks? Do you know what I'm saying? Can you feel what I'm feeling? Folks, welcome to episode 16 of What You Readin' For, the YouTube live stream series where I talk about books that I've read and give you all my juicy, detailed thoughts on these various books. Today we're going to be talking Bendigo Shafter by Louis L'Amour. Is that orientated right? The font, the like, I can't even tell which way is it supposed to. I don't know. I don't care. I had so much trouble taking a thumbnail for this because, like, the orientation of the letters was just kind of weird. I don't know. So, I'm a little bit sick right now. So, not only am I a little nasally, a little throaty, but I'm also a little hopped up on Dayquil. So, I don't know. You're going to get a very strange version of Drognath here for this, the 16th installment of What You Readin' For. If you are a returning viewer, or even if you're not, please like this stream. Make sure to comment. Let me know what you think of Bendigo Shafter, about Louis L'Amour, or just the series in general. Make sure to subscribe so that you get notified whenever I go live next. Thank you guys for watching. I'm actually surprised. When I started doing these live chats, the first episode I did was on a book called Under the Banner of Heaven by John Krakauer. Actually, what's funny is the next book that I'm going to read, not talk about for the show, but the next actual book that I'm reading is another John Krakauer book, Where Men Win Glory. Um, I really expected, like, nobody to watch, and again, in kind of the grander scheme of YouTube, in terms of numbers for, like, actual YouTubers and people who make content kind of as their main gig, my view counts aren't anything impressive, but it never ceases to amaze me when I get more than like a dozen views on a video. It still blows my mind that, like, anybody even bothers clicking on the video. Like, given the sheer amount of content that's on YouTube and the sheer content about the stuff that I am making content about, books and video games. It stuns me that anybody even manages to stumble across my content or watches for any length of time. Excuse me. So thank you for. I should probably take this off. Just kind of casually doxing myself. It's fine. I think it'll be all right. I am in the work van again here for this episode. I'm sure fans of What You Readin' For will appreciate a return to a familiar location for an episode. Um, Boy, I'm just kind of rambling today, aren't I? This is a real rambly one. I hope you guys are locked in. Um, but yeah, I just really appreciate everybody that watches. Uh, I don't I don't find myself to be like the most intelligent or articulate or interesting person in the world. I really don't. Um, and I know that I'm not. So when other people find it worthwhile to click on a video or watch it for even a couple minutes, I feel greatly honored. Anyhow, let's move on to the actual subject of today's episode, which is, in fact, excuse me, Bendigo Shafter by famed Western novelist Louis L'Amour. Um, uh, Louis L'Amour has written, I think, like a billion novels, all or at least most in the Western genre. I think he has written some sci-fi, although I have never read anything in his sci-fi writings. Uh, Louis L'Amour has I would say, kind of mixed. My perception is that Louis L'Amour has kind of a mixed like reception among fans of literature, of reading, of things like that. Um, Sorry, this is going to be a really sicky, gross coffee episode too, which is great. Um, Louis L'Amour's reception, in my estimation, seems to be one of like some people really respect his prolific writings. Like he has written a lot, of course, and I think a lot would probably categorize him among the highest, if not maybe the highest, in terms of like the best in the field of writing westerns. Um, there are others who write in this genre, but I think Louis L'Amour, I think arguably is like the kind of the top dog, as it were. So personally, I have read exactly two books from Louis L'Amour. I'm pretty sure. The first one was, I think it might have been Sackett. Louis L'Amour has a ongoing, or not ongoing, he's dead. Um, a uh, a very long series about a family called the Sacketts. Um, and I don't know, there's like 14 books in the series or something like that. And I think I read one of them. I don't know. I read one of them at one point. And then Bendigo Shafter was given to me by a relative. This was, I think, probably like middle school. I might have been, I might have still been in elementary school. I don't know, but I think it was probably like middle school. Um, I went through a period of time where I was like really obsessed with the American West and westerns, and I loved the um, what's his name, Jeff Bridges, um, Wild Bill movie, where he played Wild Bill Hickok. And I loved excuse me, should I have even done an episode today? I can't stop coughing. God, I need like a cough drop or something. This is a worthless episode. And it's fine, because this is probably an episode like basically no one's gonna watch, because nobody has read this book. It's another one of those books in this series where it's like literally nobody has read it. Um, so it's fine. I'll just die on camera for you guys for your entertainment. Um, where even was I? What was I just talking about? Um, I don't even remember. I don't even know. Oh God. Uh, the worst part is I can feel it coming on and I can't stop it. Oh, I feel like shit. And you know, you might be asking, well, then Drognath, like, why are you doing an episode of this show where you have to talk a lot if you're fucking sick? And the answer really is because, like, I want to get to a place where the books that I am reviewing on this show, or not reviewing, but just talking about on this show, are books that I have read in the recent past. It's so difficult to read a book and then try to analyze it and discuss it like months after the fact. It's difficult. It's really hard. Um, because the ideas and the scenes and the characters are so not even in your mind anymore. It's hard. It's difficult to do. I try to make the most of it, and I try to retain a lot of what I read, which is why I haven't even come close to reaching my reading goal. I was supposed to read 24 books this year. I think I might read like 15. Um, so yeah. Um, let's return back to westerns. There was a time in my life where I really loved westerns. Less so now, although I weirdly, like, recently I've kind of circled back around to kind of being into them a little bit more. You know, western movies. I'm planning on replaying Red Dead Redemption 2 here pretty soon. Check me out on twitch.tv/Drognath. I play video games live over there sometimes. Very occasionally. Less so right now. We finished Road Warden a while ago, and I think the next thing that I'm going to stream is going to be my replay of Red Dead 2. So there's that. I'm also gearing up to play Tales of the Old West, which is a tabletop role playing game from our friends over at Effect Publishing. And it's built on the Year Zero engine from Free League, which is awesome. People who are not into RPGs have no idea what I'm talking about right now, but the people who are into RPGs are like, hell yeah. Um, Tales of the Old West is this really cool game that, like, it's hardcore Western survival. Like, it's not there's no real like fantasy to it. There's no, you know, it's westerns but with dragons, or like it's westerns but with aliens. Like, no, it's literally life in the American West and how hard and difficult it was, and you have to try to find your way and see how life turns out for you. Interesting game. I loved it. Or I have loved reading it. I will see if I love playing it. But I kickstarted it. Plan on playing it soon. I plan on writing something for it soon. People may remember me talking about this at some point. That I want to write an original scenario for Tales of the Old West. So, you know, yeah, westerns are cool. I don't know why I'm going on this big old long tangent. Um, westerns rock. Uh, Now, obviously, all of this kind of comes with a big caveat of you know, fetishizing the American West and manifest destiny and settler colonialism and um, the westward expansion of the United States. These are not things to be looked at with any kind of rose-colored glasses. These are not things to be taken lightly. One might even ask, why would you want to spend your free time, role playing in the universe of such a dark, dark time of history? And to me, it's kind of like, well, that's when some of the most interesting stories happen. Um, you know, uh, a lot of the history that I love studying. I'm going to school for history right now in preparation to try to attend law school at some point. Um, a lot of the most interesting history in American history happens in the years that one would consider, the Old West or the American, the kind of height of the American West. You know, Jacksonian democracy kind of leading into, the Second Great Awakening and kind of leading, the rise of Mormonism, like all these huge parts of what are now mainstays of American culture were birthed in the years following the Revolution and kind of leading into um, the Civil War, and then um, the what I would consider largely the failure of Reconstruction. Um, I guess the point I'm trying to get at here is that, like, the West was a complicated time, and it was a very bad time for many people. Um, you know, it's difficult to sometimes enjoy media that is set in the West because of the constant background noise, the background that you have to think about, which is that this is essentially the story of people storming into lands that don't belong to them and killing anyone who stands in their way, and um, who have no qualms. Many of them have absolutely no qualms with slavery, although slavery in many Western territories was uh, outlawed, and then eventually just outright, a lot of the Western states fought on the side of the Union in the Civil War. It's just that kind of background radiation radiates through everything that you could possibly experience about the West. Any novel you read, any movie you watch, video game you play, tabletop role playing game, whatever the case may be. It's just the legacy of slavery, the legacy of massacring Mexicans, massacring native groups and tribes, um, taking advantage of uh, immigrants, regardless of it matters not whether they're, Chinese railroad workers or Irish, bricklayers, or whoever, just taking advantage of anybody who comes after you do to the West or to America in general. The exploitation knew no bounds. And we as America, as modern Americans, I'm sure there are some people who are watching this who are not American, but I'm speaking kind of specifically about Americans right now. We live in the after effects. We live in the tide that the ship of industrialization and western expansion sends out ripple effects that we are now kind of bobbing in. If does that make sense? I hope that analogy makes sense. That like we exist in the tide of history and the ripple effects of what has come before us, and what has come before us, for many of us. I guess maybe I'm mostly talking to white Americans. Um, like you know, you just have to grapple with history when you are enjoying books of these nature, of the nature of Bendigo Shafter, trying to circle back around to Louis L'Amour and the book in question. Um, you have to grapple with nature or nature. You have to grapple with history, and history is very very nasty, and the history of white people in particular is incredibly nasty. History in general, but I guess speaking from the perspective of a white person, like you really have to take these things into consideration. Many people don't. Many white people and many white Americans don't, and I try to, I guess, when I consume these types of things. You don't want to just go into a book like this and just be like, "Yay, the West was awesome. I love cowboys." Like, there's things that go along with that. So, I suppose it's time to talk about the book. Bendigo Shafter is a story about the founding of a town in the American West. I think it's supposed to be in like Wyoming, maybe, or like Colorado. One of the kind of more westerny, western frontier kind of territories. Dakota territory, maybe it is. I don't know, but and again, a lot of these areas at the time that this book is set are territories. They're not even states technically yet, and so a lot of the places that they go to, and a lot of the places that the place that they set this town up in, are like lawless, like quite literally. There's, or at least in terms of the American government, there is no like, there's no marshal, there's no police force of any kind. It's really just like kill or be killed type stuff. Um, so these people, right? These um, wagon train wagon people, Western expansionist settler wagon people. They're moving west, and they essentially, in order to they can feel that winter is in the air, right? Winter is coming, and they're like, well, we were trying. I think they were trying to get to California, and they're like, well, if we keep going, we'll probably die because it's going to start snowing here soon, and we're not going to make it. And so they're like, well, we can just stop right here. We can just literally like right where we're standing. Like they've kind of stopped to talk, and they're just like, I guess we'll just start building, because it's like we literally don't have any more time before winter approaches. And so they do that. One of these people is named Bendigo Shafter, and Bendigo Shafter at the time that the book opens, I think is supposed to be 18. He might be like 18 or 19. But he's a young man. He's a boy, really. I mean, like, realistically, in the grand scheme of things, he's a boy. Um and Bendigo Shafter uh has not been able to enjoy the kind of modern, how do I phrase this? Basically, Bendigo Shafter is interested in lots of different things in terms of intellectual kind of stuff, law and philosophy and history and poetry and like all these different things. But he doesn't really have any books. Like he knows how to read, but he doesn't know like he doesn't have any books, and he's like hasn't really gotten much schooling when it comes to that. Largely, Bendigo Shafter is good at being a person. He is a quote unquote good man, right? He has a strong sense of right and wrong. A lot of that is tied into Christian morality, and but in general, like he is a kind person and one who would put his life on the line for others, and he would um, he believes in justice. And what's funny about this book is that Ben Shafter as a character, and this I think is this is kind of a double-edged sword when I'm going to talk about. Ben Shafter has a unique kind of view on the experience of native Indian tribes in the United States. By the way, I don't know anymore what white people are supposed to refer to uh, the people who were here before we were and their descendants as. I really don't know. Indians sound so racist when I say it that I hesitate to even want to say it at all. Native Americans, I've heard, is kind of like patronizing a little bit because essentially we came here and called it America. So like it just there's a connotation to it that kind of is like you know feel I don't know what it is. And what's funny is that, and this is such a side tangent that it's insane. I'm reading this book right now. This is There by Tommy Orange. And um this is probably like four 3 or 4 books away from being talked about on the show. I'm like almost done with it. I'm very close to being done with it. Um and Tommy Orange has influenced my view on what it means to be I'm just gonna say Native American because like I genuinely don't know what to refer to. I've heard different responses from different people, and I'm trying my damnedest to not be disrespectful in any way, or I want to be respectful. Um, oh God, this is like walking through a minefield. Tommy Orange has impacted me a lot in the way that I view what it's like to be Native American in modern America. And we'll talk about that more when I talk about that book, but certainly it called into question kind of everything that I believed or kind of thought about my own views on the history of uh, native tribes and native groups. Um, it's an interesting topic, and I think that it's best saved for when we talk about that book. But excuse me, I'm dying. Um, so Ben Shafter has an interesting view, shall we say, on the people that live around this town that are not white settlers. In his estimation, these people are it's kind of the noble savage archetype, right? Where white settlers kind of move into these areas and they, kill a shit ton of people and they steal a bunch of land. Occasionally they have good relationships with uh, native groups and whatnot. But along the way there was kind of this byproduct of like, oh, Native Americans are actually like these mystical, wise, sage kind of like, people, kind of essentializing the stereotype of the wise old Indian man, you know, like as that kind of being the does that make sense? Like essentially taking that stereotype and making it the template for everyone that belongs to that group. Um, and that's racist because it's like, well, Native Americans are people, and people as individuals have different personalities and they have different outlooks on life. They have different religions. Like, and it's even weird to call this huge group of people Native Americans because like they're all like every tribe is so different in like their beliefs and the way that they handle like commerce and trade and the way they build things and the way that they talk and like all of these things, their religious practices, stuff like that. These group all of these tribes are so different and so unique and so cool and interesting in their own ways that saying Native American as like this blanket term to describe all of them, it it's it feels like you're using a you're using a it feels like you're using a sniper rifle to kill a bug, like it's so it's such a blunt instrument for such a precise job. I honestly might delete this stream after I am done with it because I don't even know if what I'm saying makes sense or is trackable at all to anybody watching or anybody listening. This might be the worst piece of content that's ever been put on my channel. I don't know. I don't know. um. So um. Well, let's. I guess we'll jump back into a synopsis of the book, I suppose. So Ben Shafter and his friends, his good time pals, make this town. They meet people along the way of doing this. Like they save like this group of Mormons. They Ben at one point saves a couple of children, one of whom he ends up falling in love with eventually, which was a weird, and like it's one of those things where, like, looking at the history of the time, I suppose an 18 or 19-year-old thinking about marrying a like 14-year-old girl, I suppose at that time wasn't considered weird or bad. That is my impression, at least. However, reading this book with a modern mind, I think sometimes calls into question Louis L'Amour's own view on this topic. Because, like, don't get me wrong, I am not pedo jacketing Louis L'Amour. As far as I know, he has never had any kind of allegations of that kind. However, to include this type of thing in your book that is fictional, like, you're not describing, if it was a nonfiction book about history, and there was a guy that married a 14-year-old and you talked about it in that book, like, okay, that's one thing. But this is a fictional story. You get to decide how old the characters are. And and again, it could just be a case of him trying to um be as accurate to the time period as possible and have this character think about marrying someone much younger than him. Um, but again, just reading it with modern sensibilities, you start to wonder about Louis L'Amour's own thoughts on the implications of that, I guess. So this town starts to grow. This town starts to grow. They, build a schoolhouse. They build a church. They start to. I would say a big theme of this book is, at what point does a group of people, a group of strangers, really, like, they know each other from the trail, from being in this wagon train together, but they don't know each other. It's kind of like uh, uh, like riding the subway with somebody, right? Like, it's like you maybe not, maybe it's a little bit more close knit than that. I don't know, but the a big theme of the book is, at what point does a group of people become a community, or become a larger kind of something bigger than just a group of people, right? At what point do they start to kind of develop those familial ties or bonds? Um, a couple. I guess I'll just kind of throw out some plot events here, because, like, at the end of the day, it really is just a story about Bendigo Shafter becoming a man, I suppose. Becoming a little bit more educated. He develops a relationship with an old, dying Native American gentleman by the name of Yiroishi, and I think his grandson. I don't remember what the grandson's name is, but Yiroishi is this kind of, like, again, this, like, stereotypical wise old Native American man who has reached the end of his days, and is kind of imparting his last wisdom to Bendigo Shafter. This, uh, this kind of like, savior white man or whatever. Um, so Bendigo Shafter uh, does a cattle drive. He drives cattle from like Oregon to Wyoming or something like that, or, like, pretty long way. It's a pretty damn long cattle drive, and he has to kill a few people along the way. And I would say kind of the climax of the book, more or less, is, I guess, spoiler alert if anybody was planning on reading this book. The climax, more or less, is like some of these people tracking Bendigo Shafter down, some people that he has pissed off along the way, and them kind of like all duking it out and whatnot. Um, yeah, it's hard to even give you like a clear synopsis because it's just like things just kind of happen. Like Louis L'Amour, the way he describes these events, things just kind of happen, and that's, I guess, kind of his style is just kind of like putting it on the page. Like, this is what's going on. This is what the characters are thinking and saying, and you know, Bendigo Shafter read this book and he thought a little bit about what it means to mitigate or to mete out justice. Bendigo Shafter eventually becomes the marshal of the town. Like, all these things just kind of happen, and again, it all is in service of the kind of, um, I'm gonna list off a couple of themes of this book, and I'm gonna say that like most of the plot events serve to advance these themes. Number one is, at what point does a group of people become a community? Number two, at what point does a boy become a man? Um, Number three, uh, perhaps killing Native Americans is bad. Um, I think there also is a little bit of a theme with Iroishi where it's like, I guess you could probably pull the theme of like, perhaps stretching one's life out as long as possible should not be the goal of like living a good life. Um, Perhaps there is more sanctity in allowing someone who has lived a good life to just die than try to artificially extend their life past when it's even pleasurable to live, if that makes sense. Like, living just to live instead of living to, um, experience the full fruit of life. Does that make sense? If someone is so old that their body has betrayed them in ways in which that they can't, there is no possible joy to be garnered from life. They can't see well enough to read, they can't hear well enough to listen to music, they can't walk well enough to take a walk through the park, they can't, their mind doesn't work well enough to enjoy conversation with people anymore. Like, at what point is the suffering of life, at what point does it outweigh the kind of benefits of sticking around just for the sake of sticking around? um I'm expounding on this theme a lot just because, like, towards the end, I think that kind of becomes a little bit more the focus is Bendigo Shafter traveling with Iroishi, and Iroishi kind of just being like, yeah, like, like, I thought I was gonna die, but I'm still here, and I already sang my death song, which I guess in his religion is like, at the when you think you are about to die, when you are on that precipice, you sing your death song. You kind of tell your story as you have experienced it, and then once the story is over, it's like, all right, I'm gonna lay here and die. And that is the point at which Bendigo Shafter finds Zero Ishi and is like, hey, you want to come on this cattle drive? And Iroishi's like, yeah, all right, why not? Fuck it, I'll come with you, white dude. And so they, they ride the range together, and Iroishi kind of, there's a little bit of a theme of like reinvigorating oneself through finding purpose, I guess, like having a mission, extending one's viability um, as a moral agent, I guess. So yeah, I don't know. I don't remember what I gave it on Goodreads. I think I might have gave it 4 stars. I think in retrospect, I probably would give it 3 stars. Um, it is a good book. I think it's a good story, and I think that some of the characters are memorable and they're likable. I think that some of the descriptions about what it was like to live back then are interesting and valuable. Thinking about surviving in the West. Again, for me, about to run this Tales of the Old West RPG, I think personally it's very good inspiration for kind of what kinds of challenges one might face in a game like that. But it's just kind of it's just kind of plain. The story is kind of plain. I think there are issues with kind of fetishizing the wise old Indian man a little bit too much. I think that uh, it waffles a bit on what it wants to say about. It's one of those things where like a lot of the characters in the book criticize politicians and the nature of greed and man's um, tendency toward ill will or evil doing. But it never really like says anything about it, right? Like it mostly points it out and kind of like reaffirms that it's bad, but in just kind of like a Christian Protestant, second great awakening way of just being like, yes, these things are bad. And I guess kind of implying that like the only way for you to counteract the bad is by kind of being able to intuit on your own, uh like what would be virtuous for someone to do, right? And kind of utilizing your advanced Christian brain to like um parse out right from wrong, I guess. um this is a this I got the we got this for like $5 or something, that we found this used bookstore. And even though I had a copy of this book, I saw this beautiful, I don't know, I'm sure it's not real leather, but like kind of leather bound hardback for like $5, and I was like, yeah, why not? Published in 1979. This particular one, I think, if I'm reading the printing history correctly, this would have been printed in like 1985. So this is a pretty old hardback. Decent book. It's not bad. For fans of the Western genre, I think you will probably enjoy it. For the average reader, I think it's probably worth skipping, unless you are kind of interested in diving into the Western genre. The last Western that I read was Blood Meridian, which I think it's safe to say now, after months and months of reflection, I think it's safe to say that that is my favorite book I've ever read, and I guess you could call it a Western. um, Coming off the back of that, as like the last piece of Western fiction that I've read, Louis L'Amour's depiction of the West leaves a little bit to be desired in terms of like, I don't know. It's just like holding up two. It's like two different breeds of dog. Like, yeah, they're technically the same animal, but they're so different that it's hard. It's really hard to compare them because they're like, yeah, they're just very different. And Blood Meridian, I think, is superior in like basically every way, even though they are the same genre. I forgot my work radio was on. Yeah, give it a read, I guess, if you're interested. I'm sorry if this episode has sucked. I feel like this episode has sucked. But it's just kind of the way it is. I don't know. We made it. We made it through Louis L'Amour, Bendigo Shafter. The next thing that I will be covering on this show is, I think it's This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno. No, you know what it is? Anarcho Syndicalism Theory and Practice by Rudolf Rocker. Um, a little thin little book of anarchist theory, uh, anarchist political theory, and anarchist history. It's by Rudolf Rocker. Anarchist Syndicalism Theory and Practice. Get you a copy before the next episode. Give it a read so that we can kind of have a little discussion about it. I guess I'll check the chat. I don't think anybody has popped in, but let's see. Yeah. Um. So yeah. If I'm not mistaken, the order is Anarcho-Syndicalism Theory and Practice, and then This Thing Between Us by Gus Moreno, just in case you want to get a little bit ahead. Um. And then I believe it's There by Tommy Orange. After that, I will be reading Where Men Win Glory by John Krakauer. And then, depending on how quickly I make my way through these next couple books, I think I'm going to try to read The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. I think I want to try to be like December and January, just sandwich that fucking like 1,300 page behemoth into into 2 months of reading. I think I might be able to do it if I really cram. We'll see. But yeah, those are the next couple of books. I'm pretty sure I'm not missing any, but we'll see. Thank you guys so much for watching. If this episode is the worst ever, I really apologize. I will try not to do any more while I'm sick like this because this has really sucked. And yeah, I really appreciate you guys checking the channel out. Watch some House of Mordecius if you're here. Like the stream. Make sure to comment. Let me know what you think of the book, the author, or the show. Make sure to subscribe so that you get notified when I go live. I think tonight, twitch.tv/drogdeath, I think we're going to be playing some Red Dead 2. So if Bendigo Shafter has gotten you into the mood to delve into the world of the West, we'll play. I think probably playing some tonight. So yeah, much love, y'all. I'm gonna end the stream. Thank you for checking this out. How do I do it again? Oh yeah, there we go.